Welcome everyone to Automation Hour. All lines are muted, and if you have any questions, please post them in the question section or chat section of this session. After the session sometime, we will post the recording as well as the link to the deck on Automation Hour, as well as the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community. So if you haven't signed up for the rest of the sessions that we have scheduled out through the end of July, I recommend that you do so. Even though you can't attend them live, you'll know when they are posted out on automationhour.com. And if you have a business use case with a cool automation solution to that, please DM us, and we will get you scheduled in on some of our sessions for the rest of this year. And we can't bring this free webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io. So huge thank you to them. And here are your co-hosts, myself, David, and Rakesh. This was from Midwest Dreamin'. Hopefully there will be a Midwest Dreamin' this year that's not virtual. We'll see. And I'm really excited to have our fellow MVP on, Mary Tagler, guest presenting for the first time and hopefully for other future sessions as well. She has a really cool use case that she's going to talk about with the use of Flow to solution that. So with that, let me hand control over to Mary. And you should now have control.
Okay. Can everyone see my bio page?
Yes.
Okay. So happy Friday, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Mary Tagler. I'm a lead application administrator at Relativity, Salesforce MVP, Lightning Champion, Chicago Salesforce Saturday, and certification study group leader. And I've been an admin for the past 8 years. I work at a company, as I said, called Relativity. We are a e-discovery software company. So for those of you where e-discovery may sound unfamiliar, it is a business in the legal technology industry. We focus on the discovery process, which is a very document-heavy process in litigation and arbitration. So what that means is our clients are typically large firms, law firms, and government entities. We help our customers distill terabytes of data down to the most relevant pieces of information. And our motto is organize data, discover the truth, and act on that. So the reason I'm talking about my company is really to set the stage for the problem and solution we're going to talk about today. We deal with a lot of data, so we're a very data-focused company. And one of the things that was really important to us was moving our support agents, we have approximately 100 worldwide, to Lightning, and also improving our knowledge process. And so one of the things we heard was our agents were very reticent to move to Lightning, and even more so concerned about how that would affect their ability to work quickly and efficiently throughout the day. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about what KCS is. We're going to talk about the problem I was presented, the solution. We're going to do a step-by-step breakdown in the slides and talk conceptually about how I built it and figured out what I needed to do. And then I'm going to do a demo where I'm going to show you how out of the box you can attach knowledge articles to your cases, and then what building out what I call our knowledge widget has done for our business in terms of facilitating consistency and ease of use in our org. So KCS, what is knowledge-centered service, also known as knowledge-centered support? It's a series of best practices. It's been around for many years. Our company adopted it with our customer service team, which is 24/7 in 2008. So it's been in place for approximately 2 years. There are 4 main tenets of KCS. It's integrating the reuse, improvement, and creation of knowledge into the problem-solving process, evolving content based on demand and usage, rewarding learning, sharing, and collaborating, and this last part, which was most important to the problem I needed to solve, developing a knowledge base of collective experience. So I'm going to take a step back and sort of set the stage for this problem and how it was actually bigger than what's laid out on the screen. So I joined my firm approximately 2 years ago. This was the first larger project I received. What I didn't know at the time was that the project had been attempted 2 prior times and had failed. So I was a little concerned that I was setting myself up for failure in trying to pull this off. But the overall goals of the project were to move our support agents to Lightning, most of which had been around for several years and were very resistant to switching the UI. Moving them to a console, they were currently using the classic console, and support our KCS initiatives, and basically making it easier for them to create knowledge articles than what they were experiencing in current day. We wanted them to follow what is called the UFFA model, another KCS term that you may have encountered. UFFA stands for use it, flag it, fix it, and add it. That last item, that A, add it, was what was really important to us when solving this problem. And we wanted to make it easier for our support agents to create and connect knowledge articles to cases. So I had a few support agents who, after the first few tries of moving our agents to Lightning, had stuck with Lightning, but one thing they complained about and said they were always switching back for was their ability to efficiently create a knowledge article and link it to a case. The biggest complaints I heard in more specific terms were they didn't want to lose focus. They wanted to be able to stay on the case page, create their content, and link it. And they weren't finding easy ways to do that. Then what we heard from our support managers was they wanted to standardize the way information from our cases was put into knowledge articles. So specifically what they were looking to do was they were looking to grab specific fields and push them into the knowledge article fields every single time. They were also looking to do things like concatenate and format that information in very specific ways. And what they were finding was when left to users doing it manually, it really wasn't done on a standardized or consistent way at all. So the solution, we built what I call a knowledge widget. It's basically a screen flow that allows our agents to create articles without leaving the case record. One of the other things it allows our agents to do is to create the link between our case and our article on creation, whether or not that article is published. And so how did that work out for us? Well, the proof is in the numbers. So our article creation increased 270%. So I looked at the 4 months prior to rolling out the widget and compared that with the 4 months after. So that 270% means that we went from approximately 44 articles per month that were created to 164 articles on average per month that were created. We also increased publishing by 79%. 4 months prior, we were seeing 26 articles per month published, and after we were seeing 47 articles per month published. So we had really improved our metrics. We had met that goal of creating a knowledge base that not only our support agents could use, but also that our customer community could use, which was very well received by all of our business leaders. So it was a huge win in our book. And most importantly, my agents were actually really happy with the result. So let's talk about what the widget looks like. So the main components of the widget is it's a screen flow. It has a Lightning record page flow component, although I'm going to show you a second way you can launch it from your Lightning record page. We're using some components from unofficialsf.com. So we're using show toast, we're using rich text input, and we're using custom footer. And show toast and custom footer are really there just to add a little flair to the end user experience. But all three of those items can be found on unofficialsf.com. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend checking it out for ways to enhance your flow, whether it be adding functionality, adding flair, maybe meeting or bridging the gap in some business needs that out of the box, Flow is not yet able to do. So let's take a look at what the flow looks like. So as I said, it's not a terribly complex flow in terms of there aren't a lot of items on the page. We have 2 screens, we have 2 get requests, we have 2 creates, and we have our toast action. What really starts to complicate things is if you've ever worked with knowledge, you know it can be a very tricky and frustrating beast. So this flow in many other use cases would have probably taken me 5 minutes. And so the devil is always in the details. So how did I start out? I started out as you would most. I pushed my record ID variable into my flow to get the current case record. I grabbed any fields on the case that I wanted to use in my flow. I chose to pick specific variables. We use our case object quite heavily in my production org. We have 51 record types. We have north of 500 fields. So in this particular case, I am pulling subject, description, and resolution. Resolution being a custom rich text field on the case object. So then I am pulling the fields into my screen. I am setting the default values to whatever the case value was. I will show you how I've used a formula field to provide some guidance text where a field might already be blank. My general rule of thumb is that I use regular screen fields for plain text, and I leverage rich text input for any field that I want to have rich text formatting in my article. So in this particular case, I am using the rich text input on both my description and on my resolution field. Description natively is a text field in Salesforce on the case object, but I want to be able to enhance it with some rich text formatting for my support agents. Then I'm using the custom footer. Again, this is really just flair for customer or end user experience. So I'm using the custom footer to rename the buttons in the navigation. So as opposed to a finish button, I am displaying create article to them. So here's a quick look at what that looks like. We'll dig in a little deeper when we go through the demo. But up here we have our title, and it's just plain text. It's out of the box. Then we start getting into some of the custom items that we've added to our flow. We're using display text to display the names of each field. It doesn't do that as you would if you used a regular field component from your flow. And then below that, we have specified a rich text input. And here we're using the description that comes out of the case. And then on the output, we're pulling in whatever we have edited that down to be. And you'll notice that I like to use VAR to preface all of my regular variables. I use F to preface my formulas. I tend to use either TT or text to preface text templates, which is something we'll look at in a little bit as well. So one of the first things we have to do is we have to create our knowledge article version. And here's where I'm going to start talking in analogies, because I think it helps crystallize how the knowledge object or set of objects is put together. We need to map our input fields to our knowledge object fields so that when we create, we're passing that information in. One of the hardest things I encountered was actually dealing with the URL. So if you're creating a knowledge article on your own, what you're typically doing is you're going to the knowledge tab, you're typing in the name of your article, and once you leave that field, you'll notice that a URL is automatically generated for you. What I didn't notice when I was doing this by hand was that the knowledge URL is not a standard URL. And what I mean by that is the knowledge URL only accepts letters, numbers, and dashes. So characters you might find in a regular URL, such as a question mark or a comma, are unacceptable in knowledge URLs. So I had to think about a way to accommodate that with my screen flow. The other thing I had to think about was the uniqueness of the URL, because the URL is really just taking a string of text, adding some dashes between every word, and the likelihood that two agents could name an article the same thing was pretty high. So the way I mitigated that was I appended my article title with the date and time, because the odds of an agent creating an article with the same name on the same date at the same time as someone else were extremely low. So that's one thing you need to consider, is making sure however you choose to execute on your URL will create something that is unique, because it will not allow you to save a record with the same URL in the system. The other thing is you need to store the knowledge ID, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're populating a junction object, which we're going to talk more about in a minute. So we need the knowledge ID, and we're going to need the case ID using that record ID variable we started out with. So here's what my URL formula looks like. It's kind of a mess, but what you see here is I leveraged the function URL encode. What that did for me was that pulled out all the characters that are never acceptable for a URL. And then I used a lot of substitute functions to pull out characters that are acceptable for URLs outside of the knowledge space. So I pulled out things like commas and percent signs and question marks, things that just are not acceptable by Salesforce knowledge. And then here I threw in the text of the current date and time. So let's talk a little bit about the architecture of a knowledge article. And this is where we're going to start to get into our analogies. So on the right, we have a diagram of what knowledge articles look like. So I think of the knowledge article itself like a mason jar, and basically its purpose is to hold a bunch of contents or versions. So let's think of our versions like gumballs. So we have a mason jar, knowledge article, we have knowledge article versions holding our gumballs. So when working on the back end, you'll notice there are two knowledge objects. One is _KA and one is _KAV. The best way to remember it, and it's in the footnote, is that V stands for version. When you create your first knowledge article, that's a first version, and it creates that top item in our diagram, the knowledge article or mason jar container. So there will be an article ID, which belongs to the mason jar, basically the container that's holding everything. And then there will be a knowledge ID, which is unique to every single version of article that lives under the knowledge article ID. Once we've done that, we use our case article junction object to pass in, again, that record ID and the knowledge article ID. So that way we've connected on our case, the article, and the case. And then we close it out with using our show toast core action to present our users with a success message that they know they've created the article and that they have linked it to their case. So once we've done that, then we can do the last step and we can add the flow to our Lightning record page. As a reminder, your flow must always be active, and we want to check that pass record ID into this variable so that it can feed into our screen flow. The other option, which I will show you as well after we've demoed the rest, will show you how we can use an app exchange flow component to launch it from a button instead, which is actually something we're using in our org. So right now I'm going to switch to working out of the Salesforce org to demo this, but before I do, I want to pause to see if there are any questions.
There are not any questions, but Ron and Ohad say hello.
Okay. Okay. Let me pull up my org. You should all be looking at my Salesforce org. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing I want to demo is how it works out of the box, because I don't think it really adds a lot of value until seeing what it's like for the support agent to create an article and link it to our case. So I've created a few dummy cases. In our scenario, we are working for a sewing machine company, and we are responding to user inquiries about the machines. So in the out-of-the-box world, I have my case. I want to create an article because we have a potential widespread defect. I could search, and I'm not seeing the article I want. So what do? I go to my knowledge component and I click new article. The first thing I want to note is this has popped up over my case, which is the first thing my agents said they did not want. My agents did not want to have to lose their focus. They did not want to have to go to multiple screens. They just wanted to be able to look at their case, look at their article, and create it. So we're going to create a dummy article. And we see here again, it auto creates the URL for us. We have a much more robust rich text editor, so we can do things like adding tables, adding video, adding images. We are limited with what we can do with the rich text editor in the unofficial SF component, but for our use case, it's enough for our agents to do what they need to do. And I'm gonna hit save. So the second thing my agents complained about is I saved this new article and it's taken me to the article. It took me away from my case. Now I'm even in worse shape because I'm not only lost focus with a pop-up, I've left the case entirely. But what happens when I want to relate it to the case? I go to related, I have no actions. I can't actually add it to my case. When I go back, I can go to my related list here. Can I add a new article? I can't. So what do I have to do? I can search the component, and that new article I created is not appearing at all. So the first thing we noticed is you actually have to publish the article for it to become available. So let's publish this new article. We'll just grab one of our drafts. We will publish. And our article title, dummy article for defect. We're gonna go back to our case. At this point, my agents have lost all patience with ever moving to Lightning. We have to search for our article. There it is. If we make the mistake of clicking on it, it again opens the article. So instead, we have to click the search, and then we can attach it to our article. This was a really long process just to create an article and link it to a case. This was a process our support manager said would not get done consistently. Plus, we haven't met any of our requirements of making sure the right fields are going into our knowledge article. They're being concatenated and organized in a consistent fashion. Basically, this was a complete failure in the eyes of our support department. So what do we do to fix it? So let's go back into the flow. So here's our flow. It's pretty simple. I have a first screen where I welcome them to the flow. Nothing fancy, just some display text. Then I'm getting that record ID variable that we talked about early on to pass the existing case into the flow. And I'm storing the variables from my case for later use. Then I'm moving on to my screen, and my screen is really where all the good stuff happens. I'm passing in the title of my case as the subject of my article, just a plain text out of the box field. I'm using display text here to label my headers for the rich text components I'm going to use. Below that, I am putting in my rich text. So here's where I have the default being the case description and the output being the question that we're going to use to create the article. Here we have the answer, and here I'm actually using a formula field because the resolution field on my case is not required. So there is a good chance that it might be empty. And again, I'm outputting to the answer field. And we're going to look at that formula in a minute. Then this is again my flair to make things nicer for my users. I'm leveraging custom footer, and I've gone in here. I've labeled my button create article. I have specified where it's appearing. I've specified what I'm calling my previous button, and that's really it. That formula we talked about is a pretty basic if-then statement. My if-then statement is saying, if there are no characters in my resolution field, then give them some guidance. Tell them what to put there. You can be a lot more specific if you like. And if there are characters, pull in the resolution off the case. From there, I'm doing a create action. I'm at this part, I am picking my KAV. So this is my knowledge article version or my gumballs inside my mason jar. And I am creating a version of an article. Here I'm populating with the variables I created. I would encourage you to not follow my example here, and I would use a custom label instead of hard coding your record type ID. And you can use that by creating a formula resource and pointing it to the custom label that you've created. And then on my output, I am storing the knowledge ID. So then I'm using that same knowledge ID I just grabbed to find the knowledge article ID. So I'm using the gumball ID to grab the ID of the mason jar, because remember, it's the mason jar or knowledge article, the container that connects to our case. From there, we are creating our case article, our junction object with that record ID that kicked off our flow, and with the knowledge article ID, that container again. And we're storing it here in the case article. Once that's done, we're using the toast action. And so to populate the toast action, the first thing I did was I created a text template right here. And what you can do is you could add a hyperlink. You could link that knowledge, you could hyperlink knowledge article and send your users directly to the article they created if they were choosing to click that link. You could spice it up a little bit. Mine's just a very basic message. And I'm posting my message here. I'm hitting include. I'm putting success as the type. And there are a few types of toast messages that you can put out. You could put out success, error, warning, and I believe there is one other. Those are all listed in the documentation that you will find in unofficialsf.com. And so I'm basically saying I want success, which is the green message, and here's what I want it to say. And that is my entire flow. So let's see how it works in action. So we're going to go to our case, and we're going to create an article. First thing we notice is all of my information maps and my rich text is preserved. I'm going to change the title. And I'm going to change the text. And I'm going to leave the resolution here. We notice it has red text, it has a URL, and here I have my buttons. I have my fancy create article button, I have my previous button. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is right now we have 3 articles linked to our case. So now we're going to hit create article. We're going to get our show toast, which is telling us that we've been successful. And now we see that we have 3+ articles linked to our case. We have the brand new article we just created. It hasn't even been published yet, but we're able to link it directly to our case. So remember, we didn't want to lose focus. We wanted to stay on the page. We wanted to preserve rich text formatting, if any, which we did. We wanted our agents to be able to edit what pulled in from the case, but still have it consistently pulled in to meet the manager's needs. And we wanted to do all that from one page. So we were able to accomplish that, which was fantastic. Some of the things we've done on our case in my org is we've leveraged the accordion component, because the other thing we heard from our agents who were very sensitive to how much time they spend on their cases, how much they're losing focus, and how much they're scrolling, is that we also put in an accordion. So right now our agents have an accordion with knowledge and then with our flow. So they're actually able to choose, do I want to look at the knowledge component and choose from some existing articles, or can I switch and move into the screen flow and create entirely new content? The other way we can do this is we can leverage our flow with a button, which, let me grab it from here. And this is the other item I talked about. So this is the second way of launching your flow that looks nice for your users. What you can do is I downloaded a pack of components from the App Exchange from Engelhard Consulting, and one of them is called the Run Flow button. And so we actually ended up using this instead of the standard screen flow component. And we label our button, we put our flow name in, and that's it. And from there, we're actually able to click a button and start our flow, as opposed to having it on that intro screen where it says click here to start an article. And the reason we did that is some of our agents provided feedback that they felt like they were always being asked to create an article with that welcome screen, or if we had it right on where the fields were coming in, that they were focusing more on creating content rather than if content was already available. So that's one other way you can potentially enhance the user experience by putting that flow on the page. And that's how we have improved and increased our agents' ability to add knowledge and create a knowledge base that's actually very useful for both their peers and for our customers in the customer community. And with that, Jen, do we have questions?
Yes, we do. Scott just had a comment. Unbelievable that someone at Salesforce thought that the out-of-the-box behavior was acceptable.
I would love Salesforce to take this and make it better.
Right? Mart asks, why not pass all case variables to the flow and save a get?
You can. I built this a while ago, and so that's just how I did it. I think it's more style than function, but you could do it that way as well, for sure.
And Ohad made a comment to you're hard coding the ID and mentioned that you can also query the record type object to get the record type dynamically.
Yes, I actually built this before that flow enhancement came out. And so I would also highly encourage you to do that and do the look through and I would use the developer name as opposed to .name, because we know sometimes we change the labels on our metadata.
Mm-hmm. Barbara asks, can you use a custom setting or custom metadata instead of the custom label? They are a bit easier for admins to find. Thanks.
I don't know. We use custom labels a lot in our org, but I believe you would be able to do so. I know, Jen, you wrote an article which I linked to quite a bit on not hard coding IDs, so I'm going to kick that one to you.
So yes, you can do a lookup on either one. And I would recommend custom metadata over custom settings, just because custom metadata is deployable and it's metadata versus a custom setting is a record, data record.
Yeah, good point.
My ask, what is the app exchange for the button again?
Oh, okay. I'm gonna look it up for you. I don't remember the exact name. And it comes with a couple other items. I haven't used the other items. And here it is. Can I post this to the chat?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. And so it'll show you a few of the items that are in there. There's unlocking and locking records and displaying a message, redirecting flows. And here's another example of the button. So yeah, and it's all free.
Ronald asks, can you expand more on how you are converting the description to rich text?
Sure. So it's not as fancy as it sounds. Here. So basically, this whole field is rich text. So if I created an article now and I left it as is, it would stay plain text. But now that I've got it in a rich text editor, I can do things like bold it and adding numbers. And when I create an article, and I can just create another one because it's so easy, it'll now add rich text formatting to what was just a plain text field. Did that answer Ronald's question?
All right, we'll wait for Ronald to.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
OHOD adds that for things like record IDs and record types, I don't typically recommend to use CMDT because the record ID in the sandbox you develop may not be the same as prod.
That is true. We use an ALM process, so usually what I do, and we use Jira. So personally, what I do is on my story, I will note all the manual changes that I need to make. So things like if I am using custom settings that are non-deployable, and one of those things I always tag is making sure I am updating the record type, because whatever gets deployed will not be the same value, because if it didn't already exist in production, it's a brand new ID.
So you mentioned the two components that you installed from unofficial SF. Can you just take us there, because there's interest in that rich text editor and possibly the show toast.
Yeah, so we've used a few of these. One of them I love is the filtered lookup. It actually works, in my opinion, a little bit better than the one that is that is now available through Flow. I actually prefer to use that. Let's see. So show toast is right here. And basically here are the links to install in the sandbox and production. Eric will probably kill me for saying this, but he is always extremely helpful and extremely responsive if there's ever an issue. He has worked with me when I was having an issue with the rich text input and one of the other unofficial components that was broke in the course of a release. But here, a lot of these, they're not all consistent, but a lot of these will tell you how something works. And here again, it's telling you like, here are the different types of messages you can put up. So you have other, info, warning, error, and success, and what they're styled like. And so I think these are pretty cool. But again, these are open source, so just FYI, when you're installing them, they're not officially Salesforce. So the other one is a screen component. And again, if you haven't been in here, you'll see there are a whole bunch. So here's where I found custom footer, and let's find rich text. And here is rich text input. And this looks like it was recently updated. It gives you the information about a demo, how it works, and the installation. So some of these will send you to GitHub to install. Some of these will give you really nice like package type installation links, but they're all really helpful. They all come in, I believe, as unmanaged. So if you need to make tweaks, you can. The ones we've worked with have been unmanaged. So if we need to change anything, the rich text component when it first came out had some default rich text. And I can't remember what it said, but I found it very confusing to users. But I was able to very easily go into the component and change that out to something that made more sense.
Great, and Eric is on the call, so thanks, Eric, for helping us with all these components.
Yes, thank you so much, Eric.
I've reached out to him a couple of times too. All right, another question is, can you add images to knowledge articles?
If you can use images in knowledge articles, you cannot use them through the editor that is available in unofficial SF. But if you wanted to edit your article after the fact, you can use, like you could add multimedia, you can add regular images. It's a pretty robust rich text editor that you can use. You can even use quick text, but you'd have to create the article and then go back. So we do occasionally have agents that'll do that. If there's a screenshot that they want to add, they might go back and do it. But if it's for them, it's more valuable to create the content, and then later they may go back and look at their drafts, and as they finish stuff up for publishing, then they would add things like articles or images or links or other things that maybe they just didn't have when they initially created it.
Ruth asks, I have used the rich text field for my users. They complain about the limit. I think it's 10 megabytes. Have you had this issue or done anything to expand that limit?
I haven't heard of any issues from my end users. So I can't comment on that, unfortunately, but that's good to know.
Okay. Jason says, I would be interested in any quick comments you can share regarding if your org is evaluating moving to a console app for service, and if you plan to migrate to Lightning Knowledge from Classic Knowledge.
So we have already done both of those things. So I do my demo in the standard app just because it's pretty straightforward. But when I did this project, one of the things we built out for our agents was a Lightning console. So it's about a 50-50 split. Some of our agents love working in the console. Some of our agents prefer not to use the console app. And actually, we had migrated to Lightning Knowledge when we launched KCS. So we were in Lightning Knowledge before our agents were actually using Lightning. And someone else had the fun of doing that because they migrated before I started.
All right. I'm going to take another couple minutes to see if folks have any other questions based on Mary's presentation, or any general process automation question we'll take as well. So while we wait, Mary, how did you learn how to flow?
That's actually kind of a funny story. I'm going to make a caveat here, and I apologize if anyone from Salesforce is listening to this. I tried to learn flow for probably 3 years in the pre-trailhead days, and I did a really, really bad job of it. And occasionally I would build flows that I knew didn't work, but were somewhere in the ballpark, and then open a support ticket and be like, I don't know why it doesn't work. And then they would fix it for me. And that was pretty much my MO. And I didn't do it a lot. So like I'm sure they would have figured it out if I was doing it like every week. Um, and it was really when I took the Rad Women program that I really started understanding variables and loops and things like that, where I started to have another interest in flow. And frankly, was jealous of everyone who knew how to use flow, and really started to put the pieces together. And right around the time Trailhead content was starting to catch up and really focus on building out flows, was when it all started to crystallize for me. And I consulted blogs. So Jen, I read your blog. David Litton has a great blog. I really love on David's blog how if you're just trying to learn a loop, he has a section on loops and you can read through it very quickly and apply it to what you're doing. And that was always the hardest part, is I could listen to a webinar or read an article and they build out a scenario and I could follow along. And then the minute I took that and tried to apply it to my own use case, I couldn't do anything. Um, and once I started putting the pieces together, I used to look at questions in the answers community. And if someone was like, I'm trying to do this, I would try and build it out. If I knew you could do it in a process, then I would try and build it in a flow. And sometimes I could, and sometimes I couldn't. Their question may not have been to build it in a flow, but I wanted to just see if I could understand the tool better. And that really helped a lot. I will say going to the new interface is really nice for people learning to use flow, because I had trouble understanding like, a fast versus a regular, and, it was confusing to
Mhm.
me. But that was really sort of my journey to learning flow. And now, not only do I feel like there's just so many more flow champions, I feel like there's a lot more content on Trailhead. There's a lot more resources. There's these awesome unofficial SF resources. I feel comfortable using flow, but it definitely was not a quick and easy road.
Mhm. Blanca says, "Stay rad, Mary." So you mentioned Rad Women real quick. Ruth says, "Can you share again what you took?" So she's talking about the Rad Women. If you could just say like a couple minutes
Yeah,
how you get involved in Rad Women.
sure. So, Rad Women is for women who identify as female. Sorry, guys. And there are two tracks. There's the beginner track, which is what I took, and it's for individuals with admin experience, but potentially no dev experience, but an interest in learning developer concepts. So we had people in our group who were coders, but maybe had taken a career break or had moved into roles that were non-dev focused. And we had folks like myself who had no dev background whatsoever. And I forget how many weeks is, I'm sure Blanca can chime in. But
I think it was
basically, it's
10.
group learning. That sounds right. I think it's 10 weeks. It's group learning, which I love because it feels like you're in it together. And so, you get homework assignments, some of it's blogs, some of it's Trailhead, and it's writing code. And then in your class, it's very collaborative. It's not intimidating at all. And you go through it and you learn it. My husband's a developer, so it was really intimidating to try and learn something that he does every day. I did make the mistake once of asking him to help me with my homework. I would never do that again. But I will not call myself a developer, even an admin developer at this point, but I do feel a lot more comfortable looking at code, understanding basic concepts and terminology. And so I think that was super helpful.
Great. Missy asks, and let's do this on the Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. If Mary, you can go and post out where you got the components and the app exchange, just so folks have access to it afterwards. That'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. And when Jen, I can send you a PDF of my deck because I do have links to, I think, everything except for Rich's App Exchange, and I can just add that one to one of the footnotes, and that way everyone will
Okay,
be able to grab that.
great. Okay, Ron says, Jen, can you also help me, or one of my co-workers asked, explain the importance of Trailhead and how as users that would benefit them, and also my developers, why they need to skill up with Trailheads.
Oh, that's a loaded question. I would say, I mean, our end users don't use Trailhead all that much personally, but I would say, like, I work on a team with BAs and product owners, and they have to understand our product, but not necessarily technical. So Trailhead's a great way for them to play around without actually messing stuff up or creating dummy data in our org. So I think that's really fantastic. And for developers, I mean, and admins and really anyone, it's a great way to learn about new functionality, expand your skill set, maybe learn the right way to do something. I will say, like, my husband's building a Salesforce app for his job. It's a completely random project. He never works on Salesforce. And the beauty of Trailhead is that there's a trail for like building an app and selling it in the App Exchange. And so, like, I sent him that, and his team is working through Trailhead to like learn all of it. So I think, I mean, for developers, there's all kinds of great content out there.
Okay, let me see if there's anything else. We got a lot of thank you. Thanks, Mary, for inspiring me to dig deeper into Flow. Great presentation. A lot of great presentations and comments on this presentation. All right,
Well, thank
we'll
you all.
take last call for any additional questions. All right, so I'm not seeing anything else come in. A lot of thanks. This was great. This was really inspiring for someone like me with no code background. So we will be posting a link to the recording as well as a deck, and Mary's going to include a link to all the great things that she talked about in that deck. So look forward to that. And with that, thanks so much, Mary. This was very educational. And we hope that you will come back in the future and do another one.
Thanks. I'd love to.
Great. And with that, thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.